entrepreneur. You wanna take your company value to 300 million, we gon' show you how to do it. Well, we got the roadmap, the aspirations. We'll give you a game plan and strategies. Seize control of your company's destiny today by tuning in to Private Capital Mastery. Let's start the show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Private Capital Mastery Podcast and Community. I'm your host, Brian Franco, and I'm excited for this episode because we historically and typically talk about growth through M&A, mergers and acquisitions. But today we're going to tune in and focus on growth through organic measures like hiring. And joining me today as our welcome guest is Fletcher Wimbush, and we're going to be talking about the talent crisis out there in the market. Fletcher, thanks for being here with me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. In fact, we were just recording yesterday. We hosted a CEO roundtable, which was a huge success.
Yeah.
And was the feedback we received was amazing. So thank you for participating there and being here today.
Loving it.
So let's dive in and unpack the details. So tell us about yourself. You know, how did you get to this place in this stage of life, and what wisdom are you going to share with us today?
Yeah. Well, we were talking a little ahead of the game, but I mean, my dad was a management consultant, business coach, and he was an introvert and a scientifically minded guy. So I don't know if that paints a picture, but like when I was growing up, like my interactions with my dad were like doing times tables and working on my grammar, which is terrible, but it's not his fault. But things like that, right?
Yeah.
It was pretty boring and dry, you know, and he wasn't the most outgoing guy you'd ever met, right? But the one thing that really gravitated over the years, as I was the exact opposite. I'm an extrovert. I found myself in leadership roles. I was captain of like every sports team I ever played on. They somehow elected me student body president in high school, and I did not deserve it. Katie, she was really hot and way more qualified, deserved that job. But
Shout out to Katie.
Yeah, exactly, right. And she's way more successful now too, by the way. But they elected me. So somehow I found myself in these kind of leadership roles. They just, by my nature, I guess, right? Again, totally undeserving. But I gravitated to the idea that if you can get the right people on the bus and on the team, that is to me the single most important thing to organizational success.
100%.
And so at the age of 16. I just latched onto that idea. And I'm 42 now, and I have not let go.
Yeah, good. No, don't let go. Because, when you do have the right people in the right positions in the organization, it's a lot easier to row, as they say, right? Yeah. You don't want somebody on the boat, using the boat analogy, right, or illustration, to not be rowing, right? Yeah. And but so how do you do that? Is it just a guessing game? Is it who you like the best? Is it kind of like when you're elected, a school president, it's just like popularity wins, or is it a different approach? How do you guys look at that?
Well, I think most of us play the popularity game or the guessing game, or I like the way your hair looks because you do have nice hair.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Shout out to the
hair. Whatever the reason why I'm attracted or not attracted to you, right? That's what it really is. It's kind of a human thing. So look, there is a classification of psychology called industrial-occupational psychology. That's what they study. It's this human science of organizational science, and a big piece of that is talent selection. Yep. And so they've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And Paul Sackett is probably one of the leading minds in talent assessment. PhD, if anybody's in the space, and nobody cares about this stuff, which really shocks me. But I'm
tuned in. I'm listening.
But no, so if you want to get geeky about this, check out Paul's stuff, right? But he basically had a recent meta paper where he looked at all of the things that statistically move the needle in hiring, right? And yes, there are scientific, very particular processes. So it's like anything else you do in business, systems and processes move the needle. Without them, it's hard to measure, it's hard to adjust, it's hard to determine if your process is working or not working, and move the needle in a positive way.
If you can't measure, you cannot improve, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
So what does that mean, though? I mean, do you find any parallels between, education or place of education for a specific role in an organization, or is it just more? Is there more artistic ability needed to address this?
Well, there's a big move towards what they call skill-based hiring.
Okay.
And so that is identifying qualities in individuals. And qualities are skills, abilities, behavioral attributes, right? Generally fall into those three buckets. There might be a few others. Yeah. And identifying those is the most important factors. Okay. So schooling and education sort of not always a big factor in that. Yes. Obviously, if you're going to be a doctor, come on, you got it. But so there's some things like that. But those identifying what those are, and then creating a systematic way to identify and find the talent who is likely to have it. Okay. And then B, to evaluate that talent for those things in a systematic, unbiased way. And then measuring the outcome. Was my prediction correct? Actually, and you can start with the end in mind too. So
we love that. We always talk about the end in mind.
Yeah, so job analysis is how you do that. Right? Okay,
so you target that right hire, that right person on the bus, as we illustrated. They're on the bus. They've been on the bus for 3 months. It's not working out. I mean, how do you? Of course, measurements are going to give you that indication, but how do you really, is there a way to see that on the horizon, or is it you just have to go through the first 90 days working with the individual after you've hired them?
Again, if you have a system and process, you can predict it better earlier in the process, right? Who you target, how you evaluate them, and be more predictive. But look, this is human science here. There's not a one-for-one silver bullet in predicting who's going to be your next rock star in whatever role in your organization, right? We're just statistically trying to move the needle forward. So once you have them on the bus, it's again structured, systematic, measurable ways of determining is this person moving towards the right direction? Because 90 days on, nobody is at full capacity yet.
No. You're still learning. You're still getting acquainted with the team and the systems, what have you.
Yeah.
So there's going to be that. You're going to be, a bit handicapped, if you would, because you don't have the 2 years with the system that this person sitting next to you has, right? Yeah. As an example.
Like Kunal was saying, is you got to have milestones, and sometimes those milestones move faster for some people, and that's obviously fantastic. Yeah. I just want to set realistic, rough timelines, but some are pretty hard. Like, I don't know, you have to be able to, I say hire a salesperson is kind of an easy example, right? Yeah. Like, if the guy can't pick up the phone and hit 100 dials a day, like, he's never going to be successful, right? So I can measure that. That's an easy milestone to say, is he willing to do the thing that he's supposed to do every day, right? Because if he's unwilling, he's only willing to do 20, then I pretty much know for sure he's not going to make it, right?
Yeah, so that's a quick measurement. You could yardstick that on a daily basis, even an hourly basis, if you're measuring by quantity of phone calls, right? If that's the role. Yeah. But that's exactly right to me, because we do the same. I mean, we typically will bring interns in, and we have measurable requirements or expectations of them that allow us to say, okay, this is working or this is not working, and here's the reasons why, right? Yeah. So when you approach a case or a client that you've been engaged by, what's your approach to, imagine, I'll pick on myself, right? Okay. I have zero systems. Let's say, I'm hiring my first employee. Yeah. Let's say, I'm your everyday entrepreneur, right? Yeah. Looking to grow and scale my business, replicate myself in some way, somehow, right? Yeah. How would you approach that?
So, Rockefeller habits, I'm sure you guys are familiar with, right? I'm the entrepreneur, or small solopreneur, or whatever. Yeah. What hats do you wear, right, currently? And then we're going to go through job analysis. So if it's the accounting hat, right? Well, okay, Brian, what do you do accounting-wise? Every day, every week, every month, every quarter, whatever the time frame is that you spend on doing accounting work. And we're going to do a job analysis. Okay. So what's the job? It's just high level. Like, what are the tasks? How do you know when it's done? How do you know when it's done well? What kind of challenges are associated with that job? What should the overall outcome of that job look like in time frame and smart, measurable, like specific, measurable, realistic, and time-bound goals? So I just interview the person wearing the hat.
Okay.
Or maybe multiple. If I have a larger organization, then we have the opportunity to do a really thorough job analysis.
Okay.
And we just start to go through, because most of the time it is just something in my head. It's a figment. It's this vague thing that you kind of know, right?
Or expect.
Yeah.
And I expect, or the typical response is, it's like, well, they expect you to know what they're thinking or wanting, right? And so you have a systematic approach of, extracting that from the owner, the leader, the manager, whoever you're working with. But once you could extract that, understand what their expectations are, and then go to work on aligning the right individual with those expectations, but having measurable either milestones, whether those be real-time analytics, whether they be weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, whatever they may be, right? But whatever you have to utilize is what you're going to utilize. And then as a business formalizes and grows and scales, these systems have to grow and scale as well. So are you finding that the approach is different? Like, let's say, for example, we use the extreme of, the first hire, right? But let's say you're dealing with a client that has a couple hundred employees, they're growing and they're scaling. Is that approach and system the same that you would take with, let's say, a 1,000 employee company?
It's literally identical. It's just a little bit different, right? Because now I have more data to go off of.
Is that how it's different?
Yeah, that's how it's different.
More data gives you better optics or
better starting point. Like, maybe I now have some clues on where the systems and processes are broken, or the measurements, or the expectations. You can begin to expect. If you get to, probably once you have about 100 people doing a similar type of job, now we can actually get really scientific about it.
Interesting.
And so I have, on our team, I have an in-house statistician, IO, and then I'm backed up by an IO team at Bowling Green State University, who's considered probably top in the world for talent assessment. So, yes. And I literally, right before this, got off a call with a client where we went through a statistical scientific process to understand what qualities were most important in hiring their project managers for their construction company.
Interesting. So you work in a few industries, construction being one of them.
AEC.
Yeah, AEC, and which is architects, engineers, and construction. Do you work outside of those markets, or is it specific to those industries? So your approach.
So AEC is my biggest. CPA firms is my second biggest. CPA for public accounting firms, and then because of that, we do a lot of tax and accounting and finance people, but that's just sort of a byproduct of that world. And then the other is just small business, frankly. Just the hodgepodge of
No, that makes sense to me because it's professional services. When you kind of find the common denominator. But in construction, it's a little bit different. Are you looking for boots on the ground type of hires? Or are you more focused on the administrative staff in your practice?
Both. Because it has grown to be such a big sector for us.
It is.
And I told you guys, talent acquisition, getting the right people on the bus is so important to me. So I love the construction industry because we have just naturally developed, and a couple of years ago, we acquired a tool called Integrity First, which is like perfect for the boots on the ground people. So we've just developed a suite of tools, software tools and assessment tools. And then obviously through a lot of experience and working with these folks, understand their world and the nuances between an electrician and a plumber, or a laborer and a heavy equipment operator, or whatever, or a project manager and a VP of construction, right? So that's my goal.
So I heard an interesting stat yesterday. I joined it was a webinar on AI, and they had an interesting study in and around industries. And how they had a ratio of how many data scientists per employee in a particular industry. And so, banking and finance had the highest, right, amount of data scientists per employee in that industry. But the lowest was construction.
Yeah.
And does that surprise you? Or
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't surprising to me either. However, it just goes to show the if you and I own an AI company, right, and we had some sort of algorithm to help anticipate, some level of the timeline of a project, right?
Yeah.
In fact, there is a group out there that does this, so that's a bad example. But the amount of data that could be captured and then utilized to improve, construction processes can save, nationally, billions of dollars, right? So the one company I was thinking about after I said it was they take measurements but primarily through time-lapse photos of a project, of a job. So they have various set points over these time-lapse photos are being captured. They pull in weather, right? So they can anticipate, okay, is it going to be a rainy day? Is it not going to be a rainy day? If it's going to be a rainy day, what's production going to be like?
Workforce planning,
so on and so forth. So based upon the trajectory of these time-lapse photos, the AI then goes in and determines based on weather and other factors, some I don't know what they're measuring, but it'll tell them you are, 28 days behind on this project. It's costing you X amount per day, right? So they could give them a better optics in and around that. But when you could do that with employees and hiring the right employees, because look, in construction, when you take on a project or you take on a job and your profitability is lower than you expected, it's not like you could go back and change it, right? And then when you hire somebody, you could always exit that relationship, but that comes at a cost, right? So what, the tools that you have and you deploy into a project or into a case, how do they help minimize not only the cost, but the time required, to find those right people?
Yeah, that's our mission, is to solve that exact problem, right? Today, we have a machine that helps you market your jobs, attract, improve your overall recruitment marketing effort. So from better career pages, making it easier for people to apply, getting the job out on all the right job boards, to automating your employee referral program, which is number one, by the way, if you guys want to solve your talent acquisition problem and you have a decent sized construction company, you better lean into that one big time. And if and as needed is headhunting and finding those people that you need to direct, cold solicit, headhunt, and doing events like we did yesterday. So again, the highly specialized, the really sophisticated talent which exists in the construction industry, the best way you're going to headhunt your own talent, aside from the hard way, which is knocking on their door and cold calling them essentially, or cold reach out, is to network and build relationships with these people and eventually say, hey, Brian, you and I like each other, right? We spent some time hanging out. Like maybe, I'm doing these cool things over here. Would you be finally ready to jump ship where you're at and come join me, right? Like, that's how all deals in life and how relationships develop naturally in general, right?
But that's the key word, is relationships, right? And how do you recruit those individuals, develop those relationships so that, because they're thinking the same thing you are, right? You want, an employer wants an employee to stay, to grow, to flourish, right? An employee, especially in transactions that we initiate, in mergers and acquisitions, we have to remind them that their job is more stable than it was prior after a merger or an acquisition. Why? Because ultimately the company, the group acquiring the add-on acquisition is what we call them, typically a smaller company, sometimes in a different geographic region, or they have a different service or product discipline. But their goal is to retain everyone. And we work very hard to retain everyone and make sure they stay. Because in a situation like that, an existing company, the employees are already working together. They already have measurable performance, right? And you know what you're getting from, and then you discover that in due diligence. But we have to remind them that, no, listen, as much as you depend on this job and this role and this paycheck, whatever you call it, right? group is expecting them to show up the next day as well.
And you may not always agree with me in this, but that is the most valuable asset you're buying. That group of people.
I do agree with you, especially in professional services. Because,
especially, but that is the asset.
That is. And what somebody once told me, they illustrated it as this. They said, look, back when everyone used to go into work, right?
Yeah.
They said, my assets, they go home at night.
Yeah.
They go down the elevator, they leave this building, and we hope they come back the next day, right? And that illustration, it was funny to me, but it's spot on because, if you are a manufacturing company, or I like to use the printing press, right?
Yeah.
A printing press is not going to go home at night, but that's an asset, right?
But you take care of it.
But you take care of it.
Yeah.
You maintain it. Yeah. Right now, it requires different type of maintenance than a human.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it still requires maintenance.
Well, humans require a complex set of maintenance. Emotional, physical. And,
I'm guilty of it as well. Right.
Yeah. So
guilty of being human.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. We all understand what it takes to take care of ourselves, and it's nice to have people who help take care of you.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. That's right. So yesterday we were talking about authenticity and the importance of it, which really resonated with me because I really, when I approach a client or a case that we're working on, right, I empathetically put myself in the client's shoes because I want to see through their eyes as best as I can.
Yeah.
Because when I do that, I could speak in a way that is empathetic, right?
Yeah.
And it allows me to further anticipate, not only anticipate what they're thinking based upon how they historically thought. And that allows us to advise them because they're hiring us, to see through walls, to see around corners, to tell them what's coming next. Because a lot of times our clients haven't been through, a capital raise or an M&A process. And so they're expecting us to guide them and lead them through that, right? Yeah. And so, but when you do that with authenticity, you find that you extract the best out of everyone around you. And that was one word that really, I think, resonated with all of us in our roundtable yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and when you talked about it, I think that builds trust, right? And contracts don't build trust. No. Maybe we have contracts and
contracts keep us accountable.
Yeah, hold us accountable. Right.
Authenticity builds trust and relationship.
Because we all know that somebody can break the contract. What are we going to do? Sue each other? Like, sure, we can go do that. But who wants to do that? No. I just want to know that I can rely on you. You're a good guy, and when things get messed up, that you're going to do the right thing.
Yes.
Because there's never a totally smooth road in this process. And when you're dealing with people and hiring, definitely not going to always be a smooth road, right?
But it takes maintenance.
It takes maintenance, and attention and care and a willingness. But I think that's also authenticity. If you give it lip service, but you don't actually take any action to demonstrate the care or do something that it's like when somebody apologizes to you, but they don't actually come to you and say, I'm sorry, Brian, for being late. But instead of saying that, which is pretty superficial, I'm really sorry that I was late. And I understand that your time is really valuable, and that puts you is probably going to put you behind schedule. And boy, I'm really, really sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Be
that's authentic. Yeah. And that's a real,
You just made me think about is, there's all these programs on TV, like dating programs, like The Bachelor or Bachelorette. I mean, I wonder if anyone's ever put together a program for hiring someone. You get the contract.
Yeah, well, that was Trump's The Intern. I think.
The Intern, that is true. That is true.
Yeah, but I don't know how authentic that was. But
yeah, I mean, I think it certainly got our attention. It certainly made money. It certainly
it was entertaining.
It was entertaining for sure, right?
Yeah.
And it put Trump in every home in America before he was president, right? Which I think
probably put him in the White House.
That's to that point, right? I think that's part of the strategy, right? Not a bad strategy, but with that said, I mean, when you employ your tools, right? So tell me about them. What you said you have a software, you made an acquisition.
So Discovered Performance Hiring Software is our platform. Discovered performance hiring systems are the systems, the processes, the human things that you and I got to master. And so we're an education company first. Our goal is to, I'm a lover of HubSpot. I want to emulate HubSpot. I want to be HubSpot someday in the hiring space, right? So, and that's the reason why I'm here today with you and why I did the roundtable with you. We were talking about this before we got started. When I started as a solo guy, I don't even know how many people have, 17 or something on our team now, right? I started, in my spare bedroom, and it was just me, and I got my first wins through authentic, just sharing good ideas with people that made sense, and then they gave me a chance to work for them, and that just snowballed into what it was.
That's awesome.
And so I'm leaning into that. I want to share as much knowledge with as many people as I can, and that is the Discovered Performance Hiring Systems, or what we call the fact-driven hiring system. All of that knowledge is out there. It's on my YouTube channel. If you follow me on LinkedIn, we got books, I got e-learnings, I got short books, long books. I will sit down with anybody anytime and spend my time sharing whatever they want. I will talk about any one of the 40 different challenges related to hiring with you, is for basically as long as you want. Eventually I'll ask you for some money. But no, seriously, I was like literally on the car ride over here with one of my forum mates, and he was like, I'm about to hire this rock star sales guy, and I'm checking his references. Like, I knew I needed to call you. Like, how do I make sure I get the most out of this experience? I mean, this is a $250,000 hire. Don't, can I swear?
Yeah.
Don't fuck this up.
Yeah, exactly. No, and the reality is, you look at it's, and you said a $4 million hire,
a $250,000.
A $250,000.
Yeah,
I was going to say, that's a big hire. It's still a big hire.
But I mean, it's a guy who's probably going to either make him $10 million or lose him $500,000, right?
Yeah, at least a $250,000.
Yeah, at least a $250,000 or tens of thousands.
Yeah, or tens of thousands, right? So no, that makes sense to me. And you see a situation like that. It's we have a client right now in the durable medical equipment space, and they will not hire away from any other organizations, and their perspective is that they want to recruit folks and grow them and develop them organically inside the organization, because it helps them to preserve their culture. Whereas when you're hiring from the outside, you're diluting your culture in their experience. Not in all companies, but in their experience, I do agree with them. And do you find a lot of companies taking this approach?
I love that approach.
You do?
It's my favorite approach, frankly. But it's not always feasible, and not every organization is going to be able to do that. And we talked about the engineering space, engineering consultancies. To bring in, say, a project engineer or a manager level, or even an associate principal type level person. There's going to be that's going to be a big investment. Yes, you need to be vetting for culture fit, and they might be very talented, and you might have to say no. Like, boy, they bring a lot to the table, and they might not be a culture fit. But aside from that, even if we suspect they are, and we suspect they're highly talented, and there'll be a lot of evidence to prove that is or is not the case, you still need to expect a long journey to assimilate that person into your organization, because I'm going to walk in day one, and I got to figure out where the water cooler's at, man, right? Like, that just takes a mental load, and I don't care how freaking smart and talented you are. There's just this learning curve, and it's probably a year, if not longer. So you make a $250,000 hire. Yeah. It's going to take that $250,000 hire to probably take a year or longer to hit their full stride. So that's a big investment.
And then you think about, if that hire did not work out, the opportunity costs of, what if you would have hired someone else, right? And so now you're walking back. Yeah. So you've experienced that loss for that period, but now you're still at the end of that period. You're still looking for the right hire. Yeah.
You hire a crew of skilled laborers to go work on a construction project, right?
Great example.
I don't know what, every day on the project you're creating $10,000 worth of value, right? Okay. You've got the crew. They show up on day one. Well, you got to show them around and get them up to speed, and they only produce $5,000 worth of value today. And then tomorrow, $6,000, $7,000. Okay, week one, they finally hit $10,000 worth of productivity, right? Okay. And then they don't show up on Monday. Yeah. Okay, now you got to go rehire that crew or that individual, or you lost one, so that sets you guys back a little bit. This same analogy, this software thing that you were talking about, this technology is solving the same or addressing the same exact problem, the opportunity cost problem, right? Now I got to go recruit. Well, it takes me like, I don't know, even if you use a staffing agency, okay, fine. It takes them a couple days to drum up a few more people, or whatever, however long it takes. Losing productivity. It's an opportunity cost. Salesperson is a much easier example. I'm going to hire a $250,000 salesperson. They got a $5 million a year quota.
Okay.
I get 90 days in. They produce, I don't know, $200,000. They're nowhere close to quota. I got to let them go. I could have hired a salesperson who could have been on track to hitting that quota. That would have means that I was on track to capture $5 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Instead, I lost 90 days and I only produced $200,000 in revenue. I'm off target by like millions.
Yeah.
That's $1 million hiring mistake.
Well, this is why I wanted you to come on the Private Capital Mastery podcast, is because this sort of conversation and thinking, I mean, these are assets.
Yeah.
We're human. We're human beings, of course, at the end of the day. But these are assets that are feeding the organization with productivity, with revenues, with profitability, so on and so forth. And I just, in my experience, looking at a lot of our clients, they have, just like you saw yesterday, they've struggled with hiring new folks or what happens in retaining, because retention. You could hire someone new every month, but if you're losing at the same rate, you're back where you started, and maybe even a worse situation because, to your point, you're not hitting the targets that you intended to hit.
There's hard sunk costs, and there's this huge opportunity cost that's being missed.
Yes.
Right, and that's it. And you guys, I mean, I don't want to maybe put the private equity guys in the wrong light, but no, I mean, you guys, rightfully, you go look at an organization, you want to say, when I remove the key stakeholders, the people who are trying to exit, will the business operate on its own? And the only way you get there is by having crucial key people, the Rockefeller habits. Do you have a key person in each one of those roles? And I've during our deal there, I was like, you got to look at this book. 10x is easier than 2x. I'm like on chapter 3. I've been listening to and from our two events here.
I have to pick up that book.
And I mean, every example that these guys are giving, Dr. Dan Sullivan, I think, you've heard. I mean, he's got just bazillions, so much content, and he partnered with this other guy, and every example that they've given is, if you want to 10x you as a human being, yourself as a human being, you've got to bring other human beings along with you to do that. You can't do it on your own. Otherwise, you're doing 2x. It's like, it's hard to do 2.
Yeah.
It's actually harder.
Like a pulley system, you know?
It's actually harder to do 2 times better than it is 10 times better.
Wow. Intuitively, it makes sense, but then I think logically it's like, well, really is it? But to your point, I mean, this is it is easier.
Oh, but nobody can do it as good as me.
Yeah, that's always the answer, right?
That's the thing. That's the limiting belief.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah. Well, look, we're gonna have in the show notes for the audience to access you on LinkedIn, your books, your ebooks, all your tools. And we'd love to have you on the podcast again. I mean, we actually plan to have a larger in-person event. The Private Capital Mastery podcast quickly became and community for that reason. So I appreciate you participating to this vision, this movement, and what we're doing. But there again, anyone that wants to reach out to Fletcher Wimbush, we're going to get you all of that contact information. Fletcher, thank you for being on the show.
Awesome.
And I'm sure I'm going to see plenty of you.
Yeah. I know. I can't get away from you now. Thank you so much, Brian. Awesome, man.
Awesome. Yes.
Pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure as well. Yeah. And thank you for joining and participating in this episode of the Private Capital Mastery podcast and community. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope we provoked some thought in you. And more importantly, we hope we provoked action in you. Until next week, we'll see you then. I'm your host, Brian Franco.